She Overcomes inspires, equips, and empowers women to become their boldest selves personally and professionally. Our mission is to raise up leaders who live with courage and confidence in community. I'm Melanie Rudd, your host and founder of She Overcomes. Thank you so much for joining us today. Our guest today is a good friend of mine. I'm so excited to have her. Her name is Siri Thaden, or as many knew her, Siri Free, as she's been found in many roles throughout her career. She has been a researcher, teacher, nurse, writer, speaker, radio show host, and Miss Minnesota. While diverse, each of these roles has helped her shape her to serve what she has found to be her purpose in leadership. Siri is currently the clinic manager of dermatology at Sanford Health, the adjunct faculty for MSCTC's nursing program, board member for the Fargo-Moorhead Symphony Orchestra, and yoga teacher on the side. Her husband is her steady support through it all, and they have two beautiful boys together. Siri, oh my gosh, I'm so happy you're here today.
Oh, thank you for asking me to be a guest.
Oh my gosh, of course. And I love your bio. I'm like, I feel like I know you and I have known you for a couple of years, but I'm like, wow, you are actually a lot of things. You have all the hats that you wear.
I think that's what we have in common. We have like this whole 5 other lives that we've lived.
Right.
And I think there was a point in my life where I kind of was not ashamed of it, but kind of didn't want to put that out there because I felt like, girl, just pick something. But, now I realize all of that experience, oh my gosh, it comes into play so often throughout my career, so often throughout my life, just helping me.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like a lot of women are like that too, where we do similar things or we learn similar skill sets. And there is that fear of like, for me, I have in the past felt, do I look like I'm all over the place?
Yeah.
But really, I'm not, because at each place that I was, I learned something that I needed to know that brought me here. Mm-hmm. And that diverse set of skill sets has prepared me for what I'm doing today.
Absolutely.
So I think it's similar with you as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was thinking about Cindy Skorick, who is the one who introduced us. And Cindy, if you guys don't know Cindy, you really should. She is the miner of all gold. Right?
Yes. And just a powerhouse herself. Cindy used to work at Sanford, and she was a vice president there. Yeah. That's how I got to know her. And so when I was at Sanford in the women's department, she was kind of the boss of my boss. Yeah. And yes, she is the miner of all gold. I love how you say that. And also her presence. She just talk about a woman that just like can hold her power and own her power. Mm-hmm. And yet she just looks for the things that are special and unique in the people around her. And she just, again, minds it. I just love how you put that. But she just finds those things and she plugs you into the things that she knows you can blossom and flourish in.
Yeah. I met Cindy when I was in kind of a dark place. And I remember talking to her thinking, you don't know me very well because I don't believe any of the nice things you're saying to me.
Oh,
I was just in kind of that season of my life. And so being around her shifted the way, honestly, I saw myself. And I feel like she just has that power. Mm-hmm. And so we are so lucky to have got to work some with her, me less than you. So that was a couple years ago, I think, that she made the introduction.
Yep.
Right?
It was a couple of years ago. At that time, Sanford Women's was holding different events and women's empowerment type events. This was all before COVID. And so,
I know.
Things, this is like a bad record, but, before COVID and then after COVID and how things changed. But, and so we had really wanted you to present and speak to your story at one of our events, just because it's such in alignment with, women's empowerment and kind of what we're really wanting to lift up at Sanford.
Well, yeah. And so, fast forward a couple of years now, your She Overcomes as advisory board chair. Yeah. And I kind of actually wanted you to talk a little bit about that because there's so many things you could be doing. And so I'm just personally honored that you have joined us. But do you want to speak to that a little bit more about why you decided to join She Overcomes and your vision and alignment?
Yeah. So what I can first kind of think back to is throughout my life, I have seen this thread of women's empowerment and speaking into women, and even in my own needing to grow. It's not like I'm the one doing all that, bringing women up, but I have found that I've just always been involved in any sort of like mentoring to women.
Right.
And so when we got connected, with Sanford Women's, and then as you started to share your heart and what you were seeing was this gap and a place that you could fill with this program and this organization, She Overcomes. What struck me first was your authenticity, I have to say. So, there's a lot of great causes out there. There's a lot of good things, but, I do see how things can sometimes get pulled away from the original purpose and the original fire and passion. And I just loved seeing that you spoke so authentically. And I could tell you really, really were passionate about it. Yeah. And so that stood out to me right away. Too, I want to just let you know this. You are so good at getting people excited about things. And I am one of them. You just have such a message that can resonate. And so I loved hearing you talk about the vision and what could be. And then finally, when you were talking about the idea of how this would be built, the logistics of it. So kind of, and I told you this before, it to me kind of almost reminds me of Bible studies I was a part of before, the way the curriculum's set up with these cohorts. Obviously, we're doing it around the curriculum that you've designed as opposed to like a religious group. Yep. But I have been involved in a Bible study in my life that has been so enriching in yes, not only what we were studying, but more just the environment that was cultivated. So an environment of authenticity, an environment of respect, honoring people's stories, honoring the things they brought forward. And I just thought about there's so many self-help type things out there for women, which is great. I love that. I love that. But I don't see anything, or I haven't found anything yet for me in my community where I can really find other women that are also kind of in a journey that we can learn from one another and just make those connections around a curriculum. And so that's what really drew me to be involved with She Overcomes and want to pour myself into it as well.
Oh, thank you so much. And, to that point, I think that was that piece when we had first launched of creating that authentic community that was so important, because I think you and I believe that you have to have a community around you. You have to have people, and it doesn't, you don't need, we don't need an entourage. We don't need all the people, but we need a couple Cindys. We need a couple Siris. You need a couple people in your corner that you can trust and lean into when life gets hard, because it's not if life will get hard, it's when and how you respond. Yeah. And from a while we're not a faith-based organization, I do see an interesting trend, especially since COVID, was that maybe our grandparents, especially in the Midwest, our grandparents, maybe our folks, were part of Bible studies. That was part of their community. And since the pandemic, I think the statistics are that 60% now of our generation no longer aligns with a faith tradition and have essentially left the church. And so there's a 40% left of people in that faith communities, and 20% regularly go. Well, the generations before us had that as one of their major ways to connect. Whereas we're in a different time. And so how do we, and so I think, how do we continue to invest in community, invest into creating our circles of influence? And so that really was a big driver in this space of, you might not get it from those traditions any longer. And some people still do. But how can we create that safe, authentic place where there's the psychological trust and they're all of the things, So,
And, and that's a great point to bring up too, because what I find, happens when you don't have community. And when you don't have that social outlet in multiple different ways, yes, religious organizations, one of them, churches, but even just going back 100 years and just how much more community involvement there was compared to now, I see what happens when that goes away or is diminished. For me anyway, I'll just speak for myself, is you tend to be a little bit more hypercritical of those that are around you, like your spouse or your family, because you're just like needing all of that fulfillment from them. Or your workplace. I think we're seeing trends in the workplace now where people really want to see their work. Yes, they want to see work-life balance, and I think that's wonderful. But in some ways, we almost expect too much of work. Like we expect work to save us and do all the things for us, physically, mentally. And it's not meant to do that.
No, it's not. No.
And so I do see where, people are seeking their social fulfillment from work, which you can have some of that, but you run the risk of really crossing a lot of boundaries, I think. When you do just look at work as your only place to do that, or at home. And so, yes, community and having those groups is so important.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And that's awesome. We're going to move on for a second. I could talk about this all day, but then I just feel like it's just a constant shameless plug for She Overcomes. So I feel like I need to move on. But I was doing some research, and that was actually I did some research, which is a Google search. Can I just admit that?
Right. We all say we did research.
I was researching this thing that was interesting to me only, but actually, this woman, Jennifer Galvin, who's a PhD and a licensed clinical psychologist in Woodland Hills, California, says that women's top 3 insecurities are around their beauty, their relationships, and their intellectual ability. I found I could relate to that. I really on all 3 of those things. Has that ever been, the
all
struggles? 3. Like talk about that. What have you done to work through any or all?
Yeah. Well, still working through it.
I know. Yeah, me too.
Because you think you've gotten through something. Like you think you're now like, I am happy in my skin, and then the next day you're like, I just I ate too much pizza, but that's not the real problem. The real problem is I got all these flaws. Right. No, I mean it's so you think you've gotten through something, but it's a constant. It's a constant work that you're doing. I would say, though, some people say, okay, pageants, my gosh, you want to talk about, really putting your beauty under the microscope. Yep. That's fair. But I would say, too, just in general, like you look at celebrities and social media, and we're all being put under the microscope constantly. It's just a part of human nature. So, for women in particular, I think that this is my own theory.
Sure. Yeah.
But I think we in particular struggle with insecurities about our beauty because of historically many, many generations past, women were not able to hold positions of power. Right?
Yeah.
So the only way that they could gain power was through a man, typically by marriage or their father. And if it's by marriage, it's you got to be attractive, right? And that's how you get and how you maintain power. Right. And so I think that unfortunately still bleeds into some of the struggle for women today is still that feeling of my beauty is part of my power.
Yeah. Yeah.
And not just my beauty is part of my power, because that can be a beautiful thing if you are confident in your own beauty. Right. But other people's appraisal and approval of my beauty is my power. Right. That's where it's, the insecurities come in. So I think that's definitely the case for me. And I will say I'm very grateful for a lot of the movement around loving our bodies and loving all shapes and sizes. Loving all looks and not just having to be one certain type. Like I remember in the 90s, early 2000s, it just felt like my body is definitely not this. It is definitely not fit for this,
Oh, Kate Moss. Remember Kate Moss?
Yes.
I know. I remember just looking at all of that and being like, my booty will never look like that. Yeah, and if that's the standard of beauty, I just won't ever be like that because my body wasn't made that way.
So even though I'm not a fan of Kim Kardashian, I will say I love that they brought the curves back in as being beautiful and attractive. So yeah, I think that part is good. But yes, so from when I think about my own beauty, it is something that, yes, now in my 30s, love the 30s. They're so much better than the 20s.
Oh my gosh, I know.
So much better.
Yeah.
I feel so much better about, how I am, who I am, and the way I look. Do I want to look good? Yes. Do I wear makeup? Yes.
Yeah, sure.
But I also then am just careful that that's not all of my focus, because that's where you can get into those insecurities.
Yeah.
And I think, so again, with relationships, going back to what I was talking about with the historical stuff and just using your beauty to get power, and then you have to maintain power, I think that can also be maybe a source of why we can be so insecure in our relationships. There's also, some thought out there that an argument that women are more relational in general, and that could be. I know, though, that my husband's very relational in a lot of ways, too. So I think it's both genders or both sides of that. But I do think that there is maybe some more anxiety around it for women, just because we want to maintain a certain status.
Right.
We don't want to be rejected. And then, as far as the intellectual ability, personally, for me, I think that when I was in pageants, when I was an ugly duckling, yes, and that cheesy cliche story, but I was truly like,
did you take off the glasses and all of a sudden you were hot?
Oh, I should. Well, it wasn't quite that quick, but
we're like, she's all that, isn't that the 90s?
I should get you a picture sometime for socials. You could put it with this. It was the Coke bottle glasses. I have terrible vision, so it was the Coke bottle glasses. Did not know how to do my hair. I'm Norwegian, and so there's no color to my face unless I draw it out a little bit. And so I was just very much, and I just had my own confidence issues in middle school. Like, who didn't?
We all, we all do, right?
But I had a hard time when I came into pageants and was, remove the glasses, and I got braces, and I had a professional makeup artist actually do my makeup and show me how to do it and do my hair, and all of a sudden I was like, oh, I'm kind of pretty.
Yeah.
And it was hard for me in the sense of, when people see a beautiful woman, and I have been guilty of this myself, it can be very polarizing reactions, right? Now, I have learned that when you're confident in yourself as a woman, you tend to not have those severe, like, jealousy type reactions or polarizing reactions to other beautiful women. But when I was, you're 19, 20 years old, and, this was all of a sudden I'd get these reactions that I'd never gotten before. Or suddenly it just felt like people really, I don't want to say didn't like me, but were just, it was like, why aren't I connecting with you? I don't understand why we're not connecting. And I feel like I'm being friendly, so why aren't you being friendly with me? And so I say all of this because, getting back to intellectual ability, I think I started to cope with that by really downplaying my other strengths, like my intellectual ability. Because then it was going to be way too much, right? You can't be pretty and smart and successful and, rich, and people will hate you. So with the insecurities around that, for me, I interpreted that more, and have grown in that, but interpret that more as trying to downplay it so that you are not seen as a threat.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's what's tough. I think is really tough with women, is that spirit of, like, jealousy or comparison. I think we've all struggled with that.
Oh, yes.
And social media's made it worse even. And I hate to blame social media for everything, because there are valuable things with it. I use it. We both use it.
Yep.
But I very much resonate with that, where I would spend a long time, especially in seasons where I'm not, like, in a good headspace.
Yes.
Where I spend a lot of time comparing everyone else's outsides to how I feel on my inside, and I never measure up. And because I know I do that, I similarly don't want people to do that with me. And so I think sometimes we have to work really hard at becoming disarming out of fear. That and that's where Brene Brown talks about that we engineer smallness in our lives.
Yes.
And when she said that, I think she said that, I mean, I'm sure many times, but that was on her, like, Netflix special. Where she talks about how we engineer smallness so that we don't stand out, or we don't come across a certain way, or we don't want to put ourselves out there so that we don't trigger that in other people.
Yeah.
But that's not really serving anyone.
No.
That doesn't help anyone. And so a lot of, even just recently, what I've been doing, my research, but I have actually been reading real books, has been around reverse engineering, and helping women, especially in the Midwest, because in the Midwest, we're told if you self-advocate or if you do put yourself out there that you're bragging or you're putting yourself on a pedestal, and there's some weird, there's something about it because we're like a humble group of people. We're hard workers. We put our head down, we do this stuff. And so there's this weird connotation around it where it's like, it doesn't have to be like that. And we can really end comparison because you can be successful as an empowered, intelligent woman who's working really, really hard and also be pretty. Like, like it doesn't matter. And so that reverse engineering is really interesting to me and how you do that. Because a lot of, I've been talking to a lot of women about this cohort that we're starting, and a number of them have said, they've said this, I'm not like afraid. I'm not afraid to do stuff, but there's something holding me back. And I've found it interesting because I think a lot of them are actually afraid of sitting still. They're afraid of actually not being productive or not being valuable enough or worth enough. And so there's not like this fear, like remember in Bridesmaid, like, help me, I'm poor.
Yeah.
Like it's not, right. That's not even it. Like they're all really high capacity, high producing women that don't want to fail.
Yeah.
And so actually their fear has nothing to do, ironically, with beauty or necessarily relationships. It actually has to do with, I don't want to fail, but I also don't want to push too hard. And I'm trying to navigate politics.
You
can't
win,
that.
right?
You can't.
You ultimately feel as a woman that you can't win.
Right.
Because either you do advocate for yourself and you kind of push a little bit, but then you are going to get some pushback sometimes. Because of other people, not because of anything you're doing necessarily. I mean, sometimes it's good for healthy reflection. Yes. But more often,
do your journaling, ladies.
Do your journaling, be self-aware, emotional intelligence. But, that's one thing you have to be prepared for is that when you do advocate, sometimes you are going to get not the reaction that validates you.
Right.
And validates that action. Doesn't mean it was wrong, though.
Right.
But you feel like you're in this hard place because I want to push forward, but I also don't want to be like knocked down because now I'm looked at as too aggressive and too pushy.
Right. Yeah.
It's
bossy, of course.
Yes.
Like the word. So, okay, you had talked about, we had shared some questions that I was going to share with you. You had talked about putting yourself out there. You did something that had scared you around taking a new job, right?
Yeah.
Will you talk about that and like what actually happened?
Yeah. So I've been at Sanford now almost 7 years.
Okay.
I fell into leadership there.
Yeah.
It was never my goal to be in leadership because, frankly, I saw leadership as one of the most thankless kind of jobs in a lot of ways. I mean, people think it's all, exciting because you're the leader and you just say things and people will do it. It's like, no.
No.
I'd love to see that place that's the case.
Yeah.
Leadership is a lot. It's, the best leaders are really servant leaders. And so anyway, I just saw that and I was like, that is just, it looks emotionally exhausting. I would never want to do that, but fell into it. So ended up getting into leadership and started as a manager. And a few years ago, the opportunity for the director position opened up in the department I was in. So this would have been a promotion. I had about 2 years of experience under my belt, but I had seen some successes. And so I'm like, well, shoot, I should go for this. And even the outgoing director said, you should apply.
Right.
And so I have to point this out, up to this point, I had never, any job that I had interviewed for, I had never been turned down.
Yeah. I believe that about you.
Well, and I say that not to brag, though.
No, but I do believe that about you.
Well, and pageants, I give you credit. They teach you to interview.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah. They will polish you up. But that actually became almost like a thorn in my side because now I have set this precedent. Like I have never not gotten a job when I've interviewed. And I don't think I don't think I really consciously thought of that. But it was definitely subconscious. And so what ended up happening is I didn't get the job.
Yeah.
One of my colleagues did. And I'm very glad she did. Was very happy for her. Was like, oorah, you go. I'm very very proud of you.
Yeah.
But it stung. It was hard. I cried and I was like, I'm 30 years old. I'm crying like this is stupid. But it was the first time I'd not gotten the job. And so I had to really wrestle with that because all of a sudden it went into this deep, like, oh, your self-worth and you're not as good as you think you are. And well, now this is the beginning of the end. These catastrophizing thoughts that you have.
Mm-hmm.
And now I mean, I would say within about 6 months or so, I really was like, that was the best thing that could ever happen to me because what that precedent had been doing was holding me back from taking risks.
Yeah.
And holding me back from trying things that weren't a guarantee.
Mm-hmm.
And so by experiencing, quote, failure,
right? Yeah.
I was free.
Yeah.
I was much more free. Do I still get afraid about things? Yes. But it just really took away that kind of leash that was holding me back.
Oh, I love that. Well, and too, like one of the statistics that we've talked about a lot is that women oftentimes won't apply for a job unless she's 90 to 100% qualified.
Yes.
And the research that I've done, and now I feel like I need to tell you guys, I do read books. It's not just Google, okay? I read books. I read,
I can vouch for you. Yes.
Okay, thanks. But it's not that, not necessarily that women don't take risks. It's just that we have more to lose when we do. And so we take more calculated risks.
Oh, sure.
And so that's, part of that courage piece of placing ourselves in vulnerable positions, of being rejected or not rejected or whatever. But a lot of times within larger corporations, it has less to do with the fact that I'm like a man is more courageous than me. It's actually not that. It's just that sometimes I have more to lose when I do take it. So I'm very calculated.
Yeah.
I have to tell you this. I didn't share this with you, but 10 years ago. So like the beginning of essentially the building blocks of She Overcomes happened. So I was going through, I had started 2 businesses. I was really happy. I actually was making money. I was making good money with a consulting company, especially in interior design. But I was really burnt out. Had my personal life was kind of a mess. But my professional life really wasn't like tragic or anything. It was just that I was like, I can't quite I need community. Like I really knew I was in a dark spot. Anyhow, during that time, I was thinking, I'm going to go back to school. I actually think I'll go back. I'll get my master's and maybe I'll figure my life out while I'm doing that. So in my mind, I was going to hide at school and get just like a Starbucks job. That was honestly 10 years ago. I was like, I'm going to work at Starbucks, go back to school, hide until I have my life back on track and figure it out. Well, Starbucks rejected me.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but I had been in some trouble. So there was something on my background check because I had, and that had been cleared up, but it didn't show as cleared up. So so I could not qualify to be a barista at Starbucks. And
you were like, what is my life? I know. Even make it as a barista.
I went to, I was a barista in college and I'm like, I have a 4-year degree and I'm not qualified to make a miso. Like what is going on in my life? But what happened though, that rejection, hilarious. A month and a half or so later became, that was when I applied to work in human trafficking and then was able to secure a job as a director of development at an international anti-trafficking organization. Wow. And so it's funny. Yeah. Sometimes what that no will bring us to, like when the door closes and it feels like hardcore rejection. And seriously, Starbucks, you jerks. But what happens after that? And sometimes you get to self-reflect, and sometimes people just hang on to that narrative, and they're like, I suck or I'm a failure, and it's like not really. You need a new set of eyes to see what's actually you need a vision for what's up ahead. So keep going, you know. So
yeah, absolutely.
That's
so great. I've never heard that story before. I think about that every time I go get my salted caramel cream cold brew.
I think it's just so funny, and I still laugh about it. I'm like, well, so fair enough. Maybe Caribou would have hired me. I don't know.
Never know.
Yeah. Okay. So, you've talked about rejection professionally. Will you talk a little bit about your proud personal moments? Like, what are those proud, whether it's personal or professional, that you really look back and are like, this defined moments or thoughts in my life that changed my trajectory.
Yeah. Well, and the first one is Miss Minnesota, getting crowned Miss Minnesota, and it's not because I won a pageant. You know, it fixed my life. No, it made my life harder in a lot of ways. It really demanded that I know myself. So I will give. I mean, you can think what you want to about pageants, and I'm not saying they're all perfect.
No.
But what it really demanded of me at 19, 20 years old was, what do you want to do with yourself?
Yeah.
What's your goals? What do you care about? What are you actually doing to show you care about that?
Yeah.
So, through the platform.
Yep.
And who are you really?
Right. Yeah.
So that was a challenge, but I think that was one of the things I was most proud of, because when I went into that competition, the year that I won in 2012, I went in, that headspace was just gold. I was in a space of, I am Miss Minnesota.
Yeah.
Not in an arrogant way, but I just carried myself like, I am
Right.
her. It's not like I'm trying to be this thing.
Mm-mm.
I carried myself that way. And I also was not competing against any of those other girls.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can honestly 100% say that I was not competing with them, because I knew how far I had come, how much I had grown. I was so proud of the things that I had, even down to choosing the stinking dress,
Right. Yeah.
But it was all my choices. And I think that was something that was a hard thing, and still can be to this day, for me to overcome, was really trusting my instinct and trusting my gut on things, and being willing to voice that and stand up for that. And so, it's a silly thing to think about a dress and why that would make such a difference. But with the dress that I chose, it ended up being a dress that everybody on my team helping me prepare for this pageant was like, Siri, it's too matronly. And it's, you need to wear something flashy. And And I know I have kind of a sparkly personality, but also I've been told I'm an old soul, and I really like just kind of a more sophisticated, elegant style. And so I was like, no, I really want this dress. And I kind of stood up for myself in an area that at the time was very scary to stand up for myself in a way. So that was one of my, proudest moments. I'm also, I can't remember what I had said to you before when you asked me this question, but what comes to mind right away was just paying off. My husband and I, a few years ago, paid off over $100,000 of debt.
That's amazing. That
in 3
is
years.
In 3 years, $100,000 in 3 years.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It was crazy.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, we lived like paupers.
Yeah.
And that was hard, not because of we were fed. We were fine.
Of course.
But what was hard about it was knowing that we could spend that money to get the things that would make us look more impressive.
Sure.
And so we had colleagues and coworkers. We're living in this 1-bedroom apartment. Our son, I was pregnant with our first son.
Yeah.
We had a nursery set up in the corner of our bedroom. And it was just like, it was hard to not let that eat at your pride.
Right.
And see other people, like our people our age or close to our age, living in these gorgeous houses, drive these nice cars, and being like, no, I just got to stick to paying off this debt. And I got But it was the best thing. I'm so glad we did it. It was hard, but it was so 100% worth it.
Yeah.
Opened up so many more opportunities financially for us. And there's nothing like not having the weight of debt or finances to dictate your life and dictate your choices and dictate your opportunities. So am I still learning and growing financially, health-wise? Yes.
Yeah.
But that was something that was huge for us to accomplish. And so I was very proud of that too.
Oh, I think that's so awesome. And, it's funny, the words you used, I sound so Midwestern. But it's interesting that the two of those most proud moments, on one hand, you said, I felt like we lived like paupers, but then the other hand of that, you were royalty.
Literally, like wearing a crown and stuff.
I know. Like you were actually, and I think that, it's just interesting because it's a posture. It's not identity, it's a posture. And so like in that posture of choosing to live within your means and to hit those goals, like that discipline is what in my opinion, that type of posture prepares you essentially to hold your head high.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
And I know that, the timeline might have been different on that. But when I did Mrs. North Dakota, I didn't really have an interest necessarily in like the pageant life. It wasn't something I was interested in. But there's something about owning that identity. There's something about I earned this. I worked for this. I wasn't competing against the women.
Yeah.
I was really practicing something so that I could walk with confidence and strength. And it was something that shifted in a mindset.
Yeah.
And so I love that you're like two of those big ones are this season and how that shifted you, and then this season and how it shifted. And ultimately, it's a posture of how you execute your life. And we all have a choice.
Yeah.
We all have choices. And there are people who, have all of the things and have so much debt that it's so stressful that you're the weight of that is too crushing. Much. It's a lot. Yeah. Yeah.
Can I say one more on that?
Yes. Yeah.
Because I remember the last one I had told you before was marrying my husband. Yeah. And I'm not saying it to be all sappy and like, no,
it's okay to be sappy. It's cool for you to love your husband. That's actually like an accomplishment.
We really are at each other's throats. But
because you're married.
No, yes, exactly. But I say that because of a couple reasons. Number one, when my husband and I first met, we actually met through work.
Yeah.
We were both in radio together at the time. And there was no attraction there when we first met. It was just like, I saw him as this aloof, sad man. And he saw me as a pageant girl coming in and good luck if she knows how to write her own name.
Right.
Really a lot of assumptions on both of our part. And so I say it's a proud moment because number one, I was able to shine my intellectual abilities and be confident around him and not play small.
Right.
Even though he was at that time a higher senior leader.
Sure.
And so that to me was an accomplishment for him to kind of turn and just see me as having, a lot more to offer than whatever's skin deep. So marrying him, to me, it's like, it was a wonderful, like coming from somebody that had stereotypes, misconceptions to seeing the authentic me and loving the authentic me. And then the other part to that was it was a hard dating time because right or wrong, and we own this. We were working at the same building and he was the boss of my boss, and it just was not convenient at all. It was not great circumstances. It looked terrible. I was the new girl at the time. And can you imagine coming in as a attractive woman that is the new girl that now suddenly is dating some senior leader? Like, I get it. It looks terrible. Sure. It looks absolutely awful. And it was hard.
Yeah.
But, we got through it and we obviously got married, which is why I'm proud of that. But it also has given me since a lot of grace when people are like, oh, did you see so-and-so, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
It's like, I think, there's probably more to that story.
Right.
And maybe she did, even make a mistake or screw up or whatever. Yeah. Who hasn't? Right. Have you lived a perfect life? So it's given me a lot of sensitivity and grace to kind of stay away from that fray of judging other women.
Right. I love that. And I think it's interesting too that you say that about judging other women. I think your husband's fantastic. I think he's so funny. He's an old man in training. Is that what he says? Yes. He's an old man in training. He's so stinking funny. But I do, and again, I can't help. Sorry, it's low hanging fruit. I can't help but say too that the judgment often does come on the woman and rarely the man.
Oh yes,
and I
you're
think
right.
That's a really hard reality in taking a look at some of those things and those narratives that we tell ourselves about other people, and there's always so much more to every story.
Always,
and so I think that's interesting. Okay, but can we talk about what I feel is your shining moment in in life? Is the time that you won the prestigious hamburger eating contest award? Can you tell me, because anybody, you'll see Siri, but you're a petite person. You're not, when you told me this story, I was like, you did not do that. Okay. You need to tell everybody.
Okay. So I went to college at the U of M down in the cities.
Yeah.
So down there in St. Paul, anybody that knows, grew up there, they have this restaurant called The Nook.
Yeah. Yes.
Like been around forever, famous, maybe just regionally, but famous,
Yeah.
And they have it's a lot of burgers. One of them is called the Nookie Burger.
Yeah.
And so they've got this Nookie challenge.
Yeah.
I was working in radio part-time at the same time that I was going to college, and I was on this AM news talk radio station, right? And it actually was, it was a very older man centric, and no offense to my male counterparts, but it just was, and so there's little me, and my one of the co-hosts was like, hey, this Nookie challenge, we got talking about it in a segment of the show once, and he's like, oh man, you could never, Siri, you could never,
Right.
and I have this silent competitive streak, this like underlying competitive streak that I really,
I have it. Yeah, I got it.
And so I'm like, I mean, I would do it. I would try it, This 40-year-old man who is like huge. I was about half his size. He's like, no, you wouldn't. Well, then he loved the idea because then he's like, I'm going to get this on video.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
So I go home being a little research nerd myself that I am. And I'm like Googling, like, how do you win these burger eating contests? And
right. Yeah.
So the challenge was you had to eat 2 huge Nookie burgers and all of the fries. The video's still out on YouTube. I have red hair in it. It is me.
Siri is a celebrity. She's a YouTube influencer. Everyone go look it up.
And you have, I think it's like you have an hour or something, or 2 hours maybe tops.
Okay.
You're limited in how much time you can be there and finish the burger. So it's not like you can be there the whole day. Of course, you can probably finish 2. Yeah. So leading up to this, I had like drank a ton of water to expand my stomach. Again, things that I learned, but I was like, I'm going to win this thing. And I get there, and he made the ultimate mistake, and he tried to starve himself the whole day. And I'm like, I read that actually shrinks your stomach, so you don't want to do that. So I won this thing. He couldn't even finish it. And he was just floored. And I just like, I got this shirt. I don't even think I have it anymore, but like, I was so proud of myself.
Yeah.
Mainly too, because on a deeper, not that everything has to have a deeper meaning, but also because it was like, you know what? Don't stereotype me. Don't put me in a box. I can beat you.
I love it so much. I just think it's so amazing. So okay, on a serious note, hate serious notes, just kidding. But you are a very bold person. I mean, and I feel like anybody who's listening can hear that through you. But you are gonna participate in our pilot launch and the cohort. And so like tell me more about that, because I kind of mentioned it before. The women who are joining the cohort are high producers. I mean, they're high capacity, high producers. It's not, like I said, like, it's not like, help me, I'm broken and poor. No, it's not that. It really is something interesting that I'm seeing about the women joining. Will you tell me why you joined and why you're doing it?
Yeah. Well, I think all of us, healthfully so, have a face in some ways. It's not that we have to bare our soul every time we meet a person. So yes, we all have a certain face. And so thank you. I find that a compliment that you find me bold. And I would say I have grown to be that way. But growing up, I was a Lutheran, eldest daughter, not bold at all.
Right.
Had a very hard time voicing my own opinions and feeling strong in that. So for me, it's been a lot of growth, but there's still, even as you grow, you still have, traumas, or just the things that shaped you, the things that cause you to fall back on certain automatic behaviors that aren't always helpful.
Right.
So I find that even in my own thoughts, like, sure, people can't always see it, but sometimes the way that I think about situations or after a meeting at work, and where my mind tends to go, I find that was not helpful. Number one, was kind of based out of some of those things that happened growing up that were not helpful for me growing to be a strong and confident woman. And that's going to happen to everybody. But also I find that it impacts, like, those kinds of thoughts and kind of those subtle subconscious things impact how you respond in professional situations. The biggest thing for me when I became a leader was having to really learn that I can't take things personally. And what does that really mean? Because people had told me that my husband would be like, you can't take it personally. You can't.
Yeah.
Well, what does that mean? Like, it was a direct insult to me.
Yeah.
Like, how am I not to take that personally? Right.
Yes.
But, I started to really understand it as, first of all, number one, it is a lot about the person sometimes, especially when it's not done in a helpful way.
Yeah.
But because we're all broken people. Right.
Yeah.
And number two, I realized that by taking things personally, I would diminish myself, and also it would not allow me to really handle the situation like it needed to be handled.
Sure.
By saying that, oh, this is all my fault.
Right.
Like if I would have done this better, if I would have coached them better, if I would have trained them better, if I would have sent out another email, all these silly, like ridiculous thoughts that you get.
Yeah.
Is distracting and doesn't allow us to get to the real core root of the problem, which sometimes does not have anything to do with you. Maybe it does have something to do with that one person.
Mm-hmm.
But I really learned that in my leadership, that's something I have to be careful of to this day. And so being bold to me, and where I see myself needing to grow in that is having the not even just courage, but just being able to, number one, sometimes you have to say hard things in a meeting that it's like, I don't think people are going to like this, but this is what I'm honestly seeing and I'm concerned about.
Yeah.
Or is against the grain. You don't have to do it in a pushy way, but it's just, it's a way, or even a way of criticizing somebody else, but it's just, being bold to say, this is what I'm seeing. This is my concern.
Yeah.
Being bold to even, be quiet.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. It's hard.
It's
so hard.
Right.
It's
when
I don't know if you do this, but it's like you sometimes feel like you have to keep the conversation going, keep it going and keep people happy and play hostess with the mostess almost.
Right. Yeah.
And sometimes it's like, just be quiet.
Right.
Just, when somebody says something that maybe is inappropriate, or instead of trying to smooth it over, that's what I would do a lot, is smooth it over and sometimes just let it sit there, you know, or if you're not sure what to say, that's going to be an authentic thing that you're going to be proud of. Yeah. Don't say anything. Just, there's nothing wrong with sitting there and just being quiet. But I find silence is deafening.
Right.
So to me, in this bold, definition that a lot of women can take many different ways. For me, it is just being able to slow down, be thoughtful, not just say things to appease the people around you, or not be so caught up in carefully packaging your message that you've just watered it down to nothing. Yeah. But to be able to just practice being bold in that way, I guess.
And isn't it funny that, so in the curriculum, of course, so I mean, I've been writing and editing, so it's just all in my head right now. What's interesting, there's a session actually on vulnerability within an organization and how leaders need to be vulnerable. And it's not ugly crying in front of a team. No. That's not vulnerability in a professional setting. Of course, love Brene Brown. You know, she says vulnerability without boundaries is not vulnerability. It's oversharing.
Yes.
You know, and so like that. So there's some really nuances around vulnerability. But her number one suggestion on how you create vulnerability on a team is to be honest. And it's so funny to me because it's such an obvious suggestion. Oh, yeah. But at the same time, when you're surrounded by colleagues, when you're navigating maybe not you, but when I have been in situations where I'm surrounded by colleagues, I'm navigating wanting to be liked, but also needing to say the hard thing. How do you do that? Honestly, because then otherwise we just self-abandon. We self-abandon, we people please, we do all of this stuff. And so stepping into leadership doesn't mean I have to lead like a man. And most leadership development courses have been curated for the male population. Not bad. That's not a bad thing, but it's not the same thing. And so there's so much to say about creating empathy, leading with that. But and having that space of vulnerability, but vulnerability sometimes for a leader means choosing not to be liked. choosing not to be popular.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I was listening to one podcast on leadership, and this man was saying how the number one thing you can do to prepare yourself for leadership. Are you ready for this, everyone? I wish I had a drum roll. I know.
I was like, where's my
write
pen?
this down. Is place yourself in positions to be rejected. Because rejection is the number one thing that can prepare you for leadership, because it's not priming you to be liked.
Yes.
It's priming you to lead.
Yes.
And do the right thing at the right time.
Yes.
And so actually the number one thing we can do is place ourselves in a position to maybe not be liked or to be rejected.
Yes.
And so you look back at not getting the job, or me, like not becoming a barista, or what. I mean, I have stories and stories of being rejected, you know, but that's actually what prepares someone to become a good leader, is being honest and being rejected.
Yeah.
And it's not sexy.
No,
at all.
No, it doesn't feel good.
No,
it's
it does
not
not.
going to feel good.
No.
But you know what, to me, I've learned feels worse is not being authentic and not feeling like you said something that you could stand behind.
Right.
And not feeling like you really were proud of yourself in that moment. You know, that is that is way more painful, because then you go home and you think, I should have said this and I should have said that, and why didn't I do this? And you don't like to feel weak.
No, no one
it's
does.
a terrible feeling, right?
Yeah.
So rejection is hard. It's hard not to get a validating response from people, but it's much harder to have regrets when you go home.
The alternative is worse. And like they're you know, I've worked for organizations. I've actually worked for a ton of startups. And so a lot of my experience has been within larger organizations or not larger organizations, but startup companies that have grown. And so I've been in that bootstrappy, you know, that's more so my experience is navigating that. And I will say there was one that I helped launch, and because I was so I was insecure about what I was bringing to the table. I had a lot of second guessing and questioning, and what I ended up doing was self-abandoning. And so I gave way too much of my power away, and then was miserable the whole time, because I was like, now I hate everything, because this is not the direction I wanted to go. This was not my vision. And now I've just handed it on a platter to someone else. And that's my problem. That's not their problem. I'm the one who gave it away.
100%.
And, you know, and so it's, but I think looking back, I can see I was second guessing my abilities and skill sets. And I was also second guessing, you know, will they still want to do it if it's only my vision? You know, all of these things. And it's just like, I wish I would have leaned into one, being honest with myself and being honest with them, because really that wasn't fair. Yeah. You know, to do that. Right. Because then who am I resentful toward?
Yeah.
The person who thinks they're helping.
Yeah. Right. Right.
But yeah, so it's interesting. I think when I look back at some of my own experiences, it's the, that knowing of yourself, that self-assurance, and you grow in self-assurance when you can make those commitments, practice failing and getting back up, and how quickly that's like the definition, I think, of resilience is like, once you have failed, not if you have failed, once you have failed, how quickly can you get back up and turn? How quickly can you move, you know? And so it's just, it's interesting to me.
And it's a muscle. It's a muscle that you have to build only by doing it.
Yes. Okay, so I wanna we might lay on the ship here in a second, but I asked Siri what her favorite quote was. I'm going to read it. Is that okay?
Yes,
and then I want you to speak to this. Yeah. And I think words build worlds.
Oh,
you know,
I
so
love
I
words.
think the things that we think they become words, and then that becomes our trajectory. And so I love like quotes. You know, I feel like everybody does, but I'm just like really into it. But okay, so your favorite quote you said is, "My life got better when I realized I didn't have to be nice. Nice got me used, stressed out, and disrespected. I'm not nice. I'm a good person. There's a difference." Mic drop. Yeah. I just love that so much.
I literally found that this last weekend.
Really? Okay.
So you want to talk about things meant to be.
Yep.
And I actually have it on my Pinterest board. So I also love quotes. I put it on. So every year I do a vision board.
Yeah.
So that, and it's not just things I want to achieve or buy or whatever. It's also words and things, quotes that I want to really soak in and help grow me that year. Yeah. So found that and was like, yes, because a lot of similar quotes or mantras I feel are almost too aggressive in the sense of, I'm not going to be nice, I'm going to be nasty or whatever. Yeah. Like, I don't want to be nasty. Like, I don't either. You don't have to be one or the other.
Yeah.
What I love about that one is it says, it's nice is almost like, how am I making everybody else's lives around me easier and really just making it smoother and meanwhile not doing the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's why I love where it says, I'm a good person, because sometimes I'm going to say things to you that might sting a little,
right?
But I want you to know it's out of a place of love, or I'm going to put a boundary here, and you might not like that, but this is, what is best for not just me, but the situation too. Yeah. And so that quote, I feel like is such a beautiful way of saying that it's not nice or nasty. It is just being a good person instead of just being focused on being nice.
Right. Oh, I know. And of course, Midwest nice. It's like it's a whole thing.
And what I find too, and even in my own clinic, we've worked through a lot of this as far as culture wise, but Midwest nice, like, let's be honest, we don't actually go to the person to work things out, which would be the nice thing or the right thing to do.
It's Midwest passive.
We go talk to everybody else. And then it makes things worse. And so it's like,
the worst.
So that wasn't nice.
That wasn't nice. No, nice. What is it? Dave Ramsey says, to be clear is to be kind.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Being not clear is not kind. Also one of my favorite quotes.
All right. So here's the last question I'm going to ask you today is, if you could sit with your younger self and tell her one thing, what would you say to her?
I would say, listen to your gut, trust your gut. Sometimes you're going to be wrong. Yes. Sometimes things are not going to pan out like you wanted them to, but to only live your life based on what everybody else around you is saying you should do, telling you to do, even when it doesn't feel right. Well, one, it's not going to lead you ultimately down a path that you are proud of and feel fulfilled in. Yeah. But two, I really saw for a long time there that my inner voice got very hard to hear. Yeah. To the point that I just remember being like, I don't even know what I want anymore. I don't know what I want. I don't know who I am, because I had just so trained myself that, well, this is what you're doing now. You're going to college and being a nurse, and then you're going to do this. And I think nursing is a wonderful profession. There's nothing wrong with it. Yeah. But was it exactly what I personally wanted? Not at that time. It wasn't. Right. It's turned into a beautiful thing, but that's only because I started taking the steps of stepping away from, okay, this is what everybody else thinks I should be. Yeah. And stepping into and like listening to that voice and uncovering that voice and turning up the volume on that voice. So as a little girl, it's right from the get-go when you're a little girl that everybody's telling you what you should be and what you should do. And the more that you can tune into that inner voice, it's not that you can't take advice. Right. Advice is wonderful. Yep. Guidance is wonderful. But don't think that you're wrong. I'm wrong for wanting this. I'm wrong for feeling this way. Yeah. That I feel like is the core of what is a challenge for being a confident woman. That's where it starts is not trusting yourself.
Yeah. Can I ask you just one last follow-up question to that? How did you discover to listen to that inner voice? Like, what were there steps? Was there a formula? Like, what did you do to be able to identify, this is what I want, this is the direction I'm going? I just think a lot of women, a lot of people similarly are in this place where I don't think they know what they want. And we do what the culture tells us. We do what maybe our folks tell us, or our spouse or partner or whatever. Yeah.
Or what seems to make sense.
What, they have a formula, maybe like this is what it looks like for success. But learning how to slow down and listen.
Yeah.
How do you hear that inner voice or that inner knowing?
It's still a journey,
right?
I still don't know 100% what I want to be when I grow up, right?
No, I know. Me neither.
I was just joking with a colleague yesterday about that, and we were laughing about it because it's like, here we are, we're accomplished women, and we still don't know what we want to be when we grow up.
Yeah,
and I think that's fine. That's fine. You don't need to know. You don't need to know exactly. But as far as just listening to your inner voice and the things that I did, well, number one, I learned the hard way.
Yeah.
I made concessions on things that I really regretted, and I really was like, I wish I would have said what I wanted. I wish I would have put my foot down on that one.
Right?
Spoke up.
Yeah.
So it's having to learn from hard lessons. But also what I have found, and I think before we got on the podcast here, we were kind of talking about this, is to not go to the coping mechanism of getting so busy with things in your life that what that really is covering and dealing with the anxiety of having to really evaluate, do I like what I'm doing?
Right.
Is this fulfilling? And not fulfilling in the sense of it's always going to be easy and it's always going to be phenomenal and you're going to leave every day just with sunshine.
Yes. Yeah. Butterflies.
Butterflies.
Unicorns. It's the best thing ever.
Right. That's not the point.
No.
But when you add, I found when I add a lot of things to my plate, it's because I'm trying to distract myself and not allow myself to stop. And think and just be. And then my final piece of advice that I just very recently did was realizing when I was doing things to please or to out of what I anticipated would be everybody else's approval for it. So through social media, Facebook. I had to get off Facebook for a while. We were just talking about this.
Yeah, me too.
I had to get off because all of a sudden I realized I was getting into this pattern of every time I'd be a part of an event or go to something, I was always thinking about what kind of photos do I need to take and what kind of, what am I going to say about this and how am I going to make this look good? And, I should post this, not this. And it was like, no, suddenly it was like, but do I even really like this? Do I, is this what I really want to be? And so stepping away from those places that you find yourself seeking validation instead of really just coming into yourself is healthy to do every once in a while to kind of pull back from that virtually. For example,
turn the voices off
in my situation. Exactly. Yes.
Awesome. Well, gosh, thank you so much, Siri, for coming and being a part of the podcast today and for all of your support. And I love listening to you and I feel like we could talk forever.
Oh, I know.
But at some point we have to be done.
We do.
Now is that time. Yes.
Oh.
All right, Overcomer, if you liked the podcast, please rate it and share it with your friends. We want to see all women walk in their authority and power as bold leaders in each sphere of influence that they belong to. Thank you.